The Death Guard, formerly known as the Dusk Raiders and known amongst themselves as the Unbroken, were the 14th Legion of the original 20 Space Marine Legions. Their Primarch is Mortarion, who relocated their base to his homeworld of Barbarus after his discovery by the Emperor. During the Horus Heresy, Mortarion and most of the Legion swore allegiance to Horus, becoming one of the 9 Traitor Legions who betrayed the Emperor. After Barbarus was destroyed during the Heresy, they relocated to the Plague Planet inside the Eye of Terror. The pre-Heresy homeworld of the Death Guard was the toxic world of Barbarus. Because of Barbarus's toxic environment, the Death Guard took great pride in their resistance to poisons, disease, and mortality in general. This fascination led them to worship the Chaos God Nurgle, and in return, he infested their armour with pestilence and disease and elevated Mortarion to a Daemon Prince. The base gene seed stock of the Dusk Raiders, originally known as the XIV Legion, came from Terra, or more specifically, the warlike and tough clans of Albia. In the Unification Wars, the XIV Legion quickly developed the use of tactics and methods of warfare that their Ironside forebearers would have found familiar. Operating in the role of heavy infantry, they were experts at survival, endurance, and stubborn defense. Their grey power armor began to carry battle decorations, as well as the modified imagery of Albia. As the Unification Wars came to an end and the Great Crusade began, the Emperor gave them the title of the Dusk Raiders, a nod to their use of the ancient Albion tactic of conducting major ground attacks at twilight, when the shift of light confused an enemy's watch and a gathering shadow would advance across open ground. The Dusk Raiders' armor was originally unpainted, save for their right arm and both shoulders colored crimson. This was done with the intent to show their enemies that they were the Emperor's red right hand, relentless and unstoppable. Many enemies simply threw down their weapons at nightfall so they didn't have to fight the terrifying Dusk Raiders. For more than 8 decades, the Dusk Raiders fought across the galaxy in the Great Crusade, earning a fierce reputation by failing to reunite with their Primarch. When the Emperor found Mortarion upon the troubled world of Barbarus, he was swiftly given control of his legion. Upon first seeing them, he told them, "You are my unbroken blades. You are the Death Guard." The legion's name was then changed following this decree, and Mortarion's words were engraved above the airlock door of the Battle Barge Reaper's scythe in honor of the moment. While the Legion was known as the Death Guard formerly, its older members referred to themselves as the Unbroken after Mortarion's words, in a tradition that continues. Mortarion based the new Death Guard on his armored toxin-resistant fighters of the same name that had fought beside him on Barbarus in the Overlord Wars. Their armor's color was changed, and whilst their main armor remained unpainted, the trim color became dark green. Mortarion's veterans of Barbarus formed the core of his new legion. Before the Horus Heresy, the Death Guard differed from the other 17 known legions in that they had only 7 great companies, although these held far more men than those of other legions such as the Ultramarines or Space Wolves. Captains of the Death Guard held 3 privileged titles. The captain of the first company was known as the First Captain. The captain of the second company was known as Commander, and the captain of the 7th company was known as Battle Captain. The Death Guard tended to be organized into units of foot-slogging infantry rather than mechanized squads. Mortarion ensured that his men were well-equipped and highly trained. He also ensured that they could fight in almost any kind of atmosphere, and placed little emphasis on specialized units using jump packs or bikes. The Death Guard did not have dedicated assault and tactical squads. Every Marine was equipped with a bolter, bolt pistol, and close combat weapon and told to fight with whatever weapon circumstance dictated. The Legion was also well known for its use of Terminator armour. Possibly as a result of this, the Death Guard were highly successful at high-risk boarding and close-quarter operations, such as space hulk clearance. By the time of the Horus Heresy, the Death Guard was known to have had roughly 95,000 Space Marines. At the beginning of the Horus Heresy, many Death Guard who remained loyal to the Emperor were massacred on XIV III by their fellow Space Marines, including Captain Ullis Temator. Roughly a third of the Legion was still loyal to the Emperor. Shortly after, they battled Imperial forces in the Drop Site Massacre. A number of Death Guard Marines, and one Lunar Wolf, who renounced his Sons of Horus status, led by Battle Captain of the 7th Company Nathaniel Garrow, remained loyal to the Emperor. They formed part of the crew of the Eisenstein, a frigate which ran the Traitor blockade in the Istvan system in order to bring news of Horus's descent into Chaos to the Emperor on Terra. During the Horus Heresy, the Death Guard joined War Master Horus in many battles and raids on the Imperium. The Lord of Death split his fleet, commanding one himself and Callus Typhon the other. Mortarion's smaller fleet led a failed attempt on Prospero to convince Jagatai Khan and the White Scars to join with them, and the Mortarion found himself in combat with the Great Khan. After the White Scars managed to abandon the Death Guard fleet, Mortarion had his Legion embark on a spiteful purge of the Prospero system. Mortarion then fought alongside Horus in the Battle of Dwell and Battle of Molech before rejoining Typhon's main fleet, which had been waging a campaign of misdirection and misery against the Dark Angels since the Battle of Perditus. Later, Horus himself tasked Mortarion with finding and destroying the White Scars. Eager to settle the score with the Great Khan, the Death Guard and Emperor's Children allies under Eidolon cornered the Scars at the Dark Glass, but failed to destroy them in the Battle of Catullus. Angered, Mortarion realized that his divided legion was hampering his war effort and ordered Eidolon to find Typhon and his splinter fleet. On the world of Inix, Typhon again showed himself and was secretly disappointed that Mortarion and his forces had yet to embrace the ruinous powers. When the Death Guard's fleet embarked for Terra, Typhon made his move. The first captain had his Grave Warden's frame and kill the navigators, whom he alleged remained loyal to the Emperor, and assured his Primarch that he could lead the fleet to Terra without their help using his corps of librarians. Instead, he led them into a trap, becalming the Death Guard fleet in the warp, adrift, helpless, and at the mercy of chaos. Then came the Destroyer Plague, and the Death Guard was struck down. But Typhon received his reward from Grandfather Nurgle, and he absorbed the full power of the Plague from Ignatius Grulgor. His body became home to the flies of Nurgle, his armour a hive of pestilence. He then became Typhus, herald of Nurgle and the host of the Destroyer Hive. Mortarion himself succumbed to the Destroyer Plague, facing its agony with his sons. Nurgle himself came before Mortarion, stating that if he did not pledge himself to the Plague, God, they would be doomed to torturous undeath for all eternity. Mortarion broke and pledged himself to Nurgle. Though the agony ended, the Death Guard were remade into a shambling army of diseased plague marines, bearing little resemblance to what first entered the warp. Mortarion himself was remade into a Daemon Prince. Shortly after this, the forces of Horus besieged Terra and the Imperial Palace itself. After a breach in the palace defensive wall was forced by Titans of the Legio Mortis Titan Legion, the Traitor Legions, including the Death Guard, poured into the breach only to be met by loyalist forces led by the Primarchs Rogel Dawn and Sanguinius. It is recorded that Mortarion personally led his pustulant plague marines into the thickest fighting that day. Following the departure of Perturabo and the Iron Warriors from the battle, Horus gave Mortarion command of the Lion's Gate spaceport. However, this was assailed in a sudden counterattack by Jagatai Khan and the White Scars. At the height of the fighting, Mortarion and Jagatai Khan duelled. At the end of the battle, a badly wounded Jagatai Khan managed to banish Mortarion to the warp, while the loyalist Primarch himself was grievously wounded. After the banishing of Mortarion, command of the Legion fell to Typhus. After Horus's defeat, Mortarion led his Death Guard in a campaign of destruction over a score of planets, until finally retreating into the Eye of Terra. Here, he received Nurgle's ultimate reward and became a full-fledged Daemon Prince, ruling over one of Nurgle's greatest plague worlds in the Eye of Terra. Mortarion sends out fleets of plague ships into the warp to carry their contagions throughout the galaxy. Concerning himself with matters of the warp more and more, Mortarion has periodically returned to lead his legion, but in his absence, it has largely splintered into many smaller warbands. However, though it was factionalized, the Death Guard never fully disintegrated as a cohesive force. Their fragments continued to fight under a singular purpose and never resorted to the civil infighting of many other Traitor Legions. The Death Guard remains one of the most ordered and coherent of all the surviving Traitor Legions. At the end of the 41st millennium, Mortarion has sensed his brother Primarch's rebirth and has reasserted direct control over the Death Guard once more. The Death Guard launched a major assault on Ultramar in what became known as the Plague Wars. Today, Death Guard members, who either are pre-existing Space Marines that defected from the Imperium or were given gene seed from elsewhere, are called Unchanged, as they have yet to transform into the diseased demigods that the original Space Marines of the 14th Legion became. Originally, the Death Guard believed that humans should be free of oppression and that hardship should be faced with faith in inner strength, strong will, and stern resolution. During the heresy, these beliefs were twisted into contempt for the weak and the conviction that individuals were not fit to judge for themselves what was best for them. When the Legion was trapped and infected by Nurgle in the warp, their arrogance and contempt for weakness turned against them. Their surrender to Nurgle caused them to become self-loathing, and now they seek to spread ruin and decay in order to let their own fate appear less shameful in comparison. A modern Death Guard force is largely made up of Plague Marines and still follows the doctrines that their Primarch Mortarion taught them. Their tactics are based on the use of foot-slogging infantry and their bolters. Any vehicles that were in possession of the Death Guard at the time of the Horus Heresy have since fallen into disrepair or been commandeered by cheeky Nurglings. The Death Guard make full use of Nurgle's gifts, seeking to attract their god's attention with their plague colonies, spreading turmoil, advancing solidly amidst a mist of choking disease, surrounded by Nurglings at their feet and summoning horrific plague-bearers from the warp. In larger battles, where the outcome is of dire importance, a decaying Daemon Prince may take the reins of the army, or a great unclean one may possess a champion. As with all aspects of the Death Guard, Mortarion has retained an iron grip upon the doctrines and dispositions of his champions. He expects even his most gifted sons to choose the path that best suits their talents and then cling to it. In this way, Mortarion ensures that even as the Lords of the Death Guard win the favor of Nurgle and progress along the path to glory, they still integrate with the pragmatic, infantry-based tactics of their warriors. Several specialties known collectively as the Mantles of Corruption are practiced throughout the Death Guard, in particular, their Chaos Lords. Some Mantles of Corruption are taken up only rarely and by the most unusually gifted individuals. The Mantles of Parasitism, Withering, and Flux are some such infrequently bestowed rewards. It is further rumored that one mantle exists which none have ever been worthy of, and that it would transform its bearer into a being of pure, malefic entropy. Thank you for listening to this entry from the Warhammer 40,000 Lexicanum.